You know, I was thinking when we were doing our joys and sorrows of the joy and the sorrow of me being here today. I'm so joyful to see you all, to see people who I have met before. I served here as the Director of Religious Education almost 9 years ago now. I was pregnant with my third child when I started, and he is 8.5. So there are people here who are sitting here who held him when he was an infant, and for that I am forever grateful. And so I feel joyful for being here today, and also I know there's sorrow, there's worry about Reverend Rebecca, and I want to just name that and acknowledge that she's going to be okay, and she is with her family member who needs her support right now, and she will be back, I promise. And, you know, there may be another person here next week, and that'll be okay too. But I promise she will be back. So, I know it's Mother's Day, but I was wondering if there was anybody here who celebrated International Women's Day. Okay, there's a few, yeah. But it's interesting to me that International Women's Day there were only a few hands up. There isn't a lot of people who celebrate International Women's Day in the United States. But you cannot escape Mother's Day, even if you try. You know, I think it's telling that in this country where America picked a less qualified man over a woman for the highest office in the land, not once, but twice. It's also a country that chooses to celebrate women as mothers, but not as whole and complex people. And I'm sharing this insight as someone who, as I mentioned, is a mother. But not all women can be mothers or want to be mothers, and womanhood is vastly deeper and more complex than the archetypes of maiden, mother, and crone. And you may notice in this homily at times that I talk about women and men, I talk in the binary, and that's mostly for simplicity's sake. But I want you to know that whatever your current gender expression, if you feel like a woman in your heart, then I am including you when I say woman. And the same goes for man. And for those of you who don't feel like a woman or a man, you are also included in this discussion, because you too have been forced into a role, a gender expression, and identity in ways that have harmed you. So wherever you are on the spectrum of your gender journey, take what works for you and leave the rest. Now, in the wisdom story, I talked about a time that I had to stand up to a bully and how my friend told me to bring that Kali energy. But with young kids in the room, I didn't want to share the fullness of who Kali really is. Some of you, it sounds like, are laughing knowingly, so you know. Kali embodies fierceness, a fierceness that I had forgotten lived in women until my friend invoked her name. And if you remember the images I shared, Kali's tongue is sticking out, and that is so that she can drink the blood of the demon who was threatening humanity. And in other images, she has the head of a man in one of her hands and a bloody sword in the other, and she is standing on the head of a bull, and she has a necklace of the skulls of her enemies. She is not playing around. But this was not the image of female defiance I saw growing up and into adulthood. My journey into womanhood was bookended by two brave women doing their best to stand up to powerful men, Anita Hill and Christine Blasey Ford, yep. Both of whom testified against Supreme Court justices at their Senate confirmation hearings. And these women, they could not show a bead of sweat or speak above a professional and practiced indoor voice, lest they be called hysterical women. Meanwhile, the men in the Senate became red-faced with rage from yelling at them and haranguing them. Does anybody remember this? Yeah? And despite their bravery, both abusers ended up serving on our highest court, making decisions that will impact me and my daughters for years to come. And a few years ago, we watched Hillary Clinton wear her white pantsuit and invoke the spirit of the suffragists while being touted as a feminist hero. And yet, I couldn't forget her actions in my early adulthood when she smeared the name of a young woman who was my age, a woman who could have been her daughter, a young woman who her spouse coerced and took advantage of. In short, white supremacy and patriarchy had robbed me of images and stories like Collie's and fed me example after example of how standing up to men who violated your boundaries just resulted in more bullying and those in power gaslighting you and making you the villain. But my friends, there is another way forward. What if, on this Mother's Day, as complicated as this day can be, we take a moment to think about the spiritual practice of honoring the work of women, regardless of their reproductive status? I think I need to say that again. What if on this Mother's Day, as complicated as the day can be, we take a moment to think about the spiritual practice of honoring the work of women, regardless of their reproductive status? What if we really consider our female, our woman, international interconnectedness? In her 2019 book, Women's Work, Megan K. Stack writes about her experience as a privileged white woman living internationally with her husband as she starts having children. She hires domestic workers in China and India to help her manage her household so that she can have it all. Who here has thought or maybe tried to have it all? I have. I tried, it did not work, yeah. I know, you don't have to raise your hand, I know you're out there. And by have it all, that means like you have the career, you have the kids, you have the the great wardrobe, the perfect diaper bag, all the great things, right? As her experience in this interconnected and intimate web of women's work unfolds in her book, she becomes thoughtfully aware of how she and the women she hires to help her are letting the men in their lives off the hook for their share of the domestic labor. She challenges this model of white upper middle class and affluent feminism, the feminism championed by people like Facebook executive Sheryl Sandberg in her book, Lean In. Sandberg says she shouldn't be asked who is at home with the kids, which she shouldn't, because her husband is never asked that question. And while it is true, absolutely, that asking a woman who is at home with the kids is super sexist, the fact of the matter is that someone has to be home caring for the kids and keeping the house and cooking. And if it's not Sandberg and it's not her spouse, who is it? And what are those people giving up to take care of the Sandberg household? Megan Stack says something that I've often thought about as someone who lives on the edges of two social classes, someone who has both been hired as a nanny and someone who has also hired a nanny. She says, I never hear anybody point out the plainest truth, that the Sandberg model for women's emancipation depends itself upon a permanent underclass of impoverished women. Okay, guys, men, hold on to your seats because I'm gonna say something. And these are her words, but I stand by them too. In the end, the answer to liberation, to emancipation for us all, is men. They have to do the work. They have to do the damn work. This is what she says. Why do we women tie ourselves in knots to avoid saying this one simple truth? It's a daily and repetitive and eternal truth, and it is a dangerous truth. Because if we press the point, we can blow our household to pieces. We can take our families apart. We can spoil our great love affairs. This demand is enough to destroy almost everything we hold dear. So we shut up and we do the work. And in case you think I'm only speaking of cisgendered, heterosexual households where women generally bear the mental load, I'm not. I'm talking about centering the women who are doing the work most typically deemed women's work. The International Labor Organization believes there are as many as 100 million domestic workers in the world, and 80% of them are women. And when women are too poor to hire nannies, housekeepers, and the like, they depend on other women in their network, aunts, cousins, grandmothers, and our society runs on the unpaid labor of women. As a global society, we rely on this delicate and intricate web of women doing the extraordinary and undervalued work of the home. Often, the liberation of the white upper middle class comes at the expense and exploitation of poor and Black and brown women. And this version of feminism is born out of the toxic individualist narrative that pervades the so-called American dream. So, I invite you into a new, fierce, holistic, and community-centered feminism. A feminism envisioned by womanist, Black feminist, mujerista, and Latina theologians. In this fierce feminism, we are all genders, invited to come back to ourselves, to do deep inner healing work, to know that that work will ripple out into our communities. In this fierce feminism, we set and honor boundaries with ourselves and with others. We gracefully and skillfully embody the words of Prentice Hemphill, who said, "Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously." Boundaries give us the space to do the work of loving ourselves. And they might be, they say, actually the first and fundamental expression of self-love. They also give us the space to love and witness others as they are, even those who have hurt us. And in this fierce feminism, we are so comfortable and grounded in our boundaries that if and when someone tries to bully us into violating our boundaries, we let them have their feelings without changing who or what we are at our core. In this fierce feminism, we use our rage at injustice to protect those most at risk of persecution. We summon that protective energy, that mama bear energy, first for our own inner spirit, and then for those around us who need to be protected. In this fierce feminism, we focus on relationships over outcomes. We move at the speed of trust. We lean into the collective wisdom of the community instead of the knowledge of selected elites. In this fierce feminism, we don't aspire to have it all, or to do it all, or to be everything to everyone. We celebrate the person who does the laundry with the same gratitude and reverence as the person who sits in the C-suite, centered in the knowing that all work has value, and our society relies on each of us doing our job well. We celebrate the ways our work is intertwined and interdependent. In this fierce feminism, we know that all bodies are whole and holy, and we honor the decisions of each person to make their own choices about their body. And consent, when given, is enthusiastic and ongoing. In this fierce feminism, all are invited to love who they love and share their love both publicly and privately in the ways that feel most authentic and true to them. As they say in the Hebrew scriptures, there is a time for everything and a season. And now is the time to gather our fiercest feminist energy and go out into the world embracing a strong, life-giving energy, a fierce feminist warrior energy that will fight for justice. Now is the time, no matter what your gender, to embrace your mama bear energy and protect the most vulnerable among us. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.